Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah Satnam.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Gavin Baulch. He's the presenter for Channel 31's Support Life program. From last week, Gavin, we were talking about pastoral matters, etc. I believe that you're a chaplain. You're chaplains for, is it the Victoria Police?
Yeah, Victoria Police, and some people call me chaplain to the arts as well.
Chaplain to the arts. Oh yeah, tell me about that. What's chaplain to the arts?
Oh, okay. Well, basically, some of the arts community, if they're doing an opening somewhere, sometimes I'm asked just to pray or bring a devotion, or just encourage artists, Christian artists, non-Christian artists, to embrace this gift that they've got in some form. That's sort of a broad brushstroke of that.
Well, that's very interesting, because there must be that sort of spiritual perspective within artists to have initiated that.
Yeah, there's been some really interesting moments. I think the most memorable moment that came out of this, I was asked to attend an Aboriginal theatrical group of dancers, and it was in Fitzroy, and I went along to pray with them just a bit before it began. Into the first quarter of this very moving corroboree, whatever the dance components were, I was convicted, because I knew a story from our family that in the Western District, when the rail lines were being laid, our family owned land. They also had a contract to clear the scrub for the rail line. So as they burnt the scrub, they threw in men, women and children alive, Aboriginals, into these burning fires. And my father was a witness to this.
Yes.
It remained with him, and I would find my dad crying uncontrollably in the lounge room. A couple of times a year I'd be walking in and he'd be holding a little figurine of an Aboriginal figure, which had in fact been made by William Rickett, if you know William Rickett Sanctuary.
William Rickett, yeah.
So as William Rickett travelled around Australia and in support of Aboriginal people, he was making these little sculptings and firing them, and he'd throw the ones that were burnt, that didn't work, and my dad had picked one up, and this reminded him of this tragedy, but he didn't know what to do with it. So when Dad was ill in his last days, I said, Dad, I've got to ask you a question. Why do I find you crying? He would say, clear out, son, you know, not your business. And he said, well, I've got to tell you something. This is what happened, and I would hold this figurine. I didn't know whether I wanted to be redeemed, but I saw my parents and family do this with others. Okay, this was 10 years before I'm at this dance group. And suddenly I break down in tears, snotting like a girl.
Yes.
And I've got to stop the dance, and I go into the middle of this dance, and I turn to the audience of I don't know how many people were there with my wife, and I said, I have to confess something. Our family did this, and I turned to the Aboriginal group and I said, please forgive us. There was this silence, and I'm still snotting, and I mean, I was like this grown-up girl, right? I'm sorry, ladies, if you're listening, but not quite manly.
Yes, right.
And so they said, well, thank you. So I said, well, I've got to go home. So we walked out at this point, and we're crossing the street, the tram's running, and there's these voices, stop, Mr. Baulch, stop. So they came out in the middle of the street with trams. They put their arms around us, and this was their comment. We knew those things happen. You're the first person to ask forgiveness. And we've had no one to forgive to this moment. We collectively embrace you in love, and we say we accept and we give you our forgiveness. Now, reconciliation is a funny thing. We can say sorry well, it's a good word, but it's not as deep as the word forgive me. And even though I was removed by a whole generation of an event that happened before I was born.
Yes, yes.
There is something that is still there, that's passed on somehow. Is it spiritually? Is it psychic? Is it in the genes? Or what is it? But there had to be resolution. And then I was asked to do an artwork of confession. Well, it took me 2 years to do a piece of artwork that said, I, Gavin Baulch, confess, please forgive me. And I put it in a little box. And I gave it to some Aboriginal elders because they asked me to do it. It took me 2 years. Why? I was terrified that there was going to be a class action on our family name.
Yes.
Terrified. Fear. Where did that fear come from? I could not move a pen to write that thing that I'd confessed publicly.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I finally did it, hand them across, and I've been told it's passed around and it brings healing to Aboriginal folks. So I don't understand the process, it's just the story.
And it's a brilliant story, and it sort of leads back into actually, because there's a lot of tribal awareness, tribal consciousness, and I'm using tribal in a broadly generic way. As a police chaplain, you're also dealing with a tribal mentality at one level. Can you expand on your experiences of that fortress mentality which police of necessity entertain?
All right. I'll put it in my words and let's see how this goes. You've got men and women of Victoria Police who are at the coalface and they see things that don't often get in the newspaper.
Exactly.
They see the worst of humanity at its very worst. Sometimes they see the best, but it's mainly not good what's seen. And so how do you deal with the realities and horrors of the human condition sometimes as it presents itself?
Exactly.
And you know, there may be some who turn to other supports, crutches. But then that happens right across the board in society. If we can't talk, trust, seek the advice from another human being, a community, if we become so independent, we're alone, and so codependent, we create issues for each other, and not interdependent, where we need to embrace one another. Well-being and healing can't come. The men and women out there in the police force need to hear from us, well done, good and faithful servant. I wouldn't be in their shoes for quids or for dollars.
No, or for seconds or minutes, because we're out of time. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity. We're speaking with Gavin Baulch. He's the host of Channel 31's Support Life program. Gavin, we're talking about experience as a police chaplain. One of the issues with police is family, their wife, their children. They're in danger much of the time, but they also do work which they can't share or shouldn't share with their family. Do you come across that much? How do you manage that?
Okay, I think any part of society that's dealing with traumatic issues, you know, you think of the Ambos and others who are first or second to the scene of terrible road accidents, and sometimes they're literally shoveling body parts in a bag to be sorted out later.
Yes.
You can introduce black humour. You certainly want to protect your family from some of these things. It means that you tend to close up. And your intentions may be good and honourable in terms of I just can't talk about the day, it's been terrible, it's going to take me days to get over it, or someone might take some leave from the position in the police force. But it kind of filters down, and it does hurt and cause other problems. Seriously, all one can do is say, talk to someone. You've got to get what's on the inside out.
Yeah.
with someone you can trust. And the police have a wonderful support system for this well-being, the need to articulate, the need to just take a deep breath and receive some advice and maybe decide to take some steps and some action. But it's not easy, I think, particularly of police because there's a shortage of manpower in different areas when it comes to abuse of children, and horrific things happen to very young children. They then go home and they've got a 2-year-old.
Yes.
And things just flood back, and maybe it causes some, a bad outcome because there hasn't been sufficient healing or processing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it impacts, but it does impact whether it's in the armed services, the ambulance, the firefighters.
Yeah.
They see things, and it remains upstairs, up here. Right. The memory, it's like if you lose someone in your own family and grief comes, and then you think you've worked through your grief and you can be out whistling or swimming or fishing, or you're doing something, and like a tsunami, from nowhere, it just comes back to you. What? Okay, so that's part of the human condition. These things happen with all of us.
Yes.
We need to remove it, get it out, and sometimes I think this is where the element of faith and a worldview that there's more to me than me.
That's right.
Is when we talk to our invisible friend. I call Jesus Christ my invisible friend, so perhaps I could be locked up for being schizophrenic. But I will just utter those words, those expressions to my God and say, this is how it's been, I don't know who else to go to.
You mentioned earlier about sort of gratitude, the police recognising that they've been recognised for doing a good job. Do you find that, because frequently the media, for whatever reason, is always looking for a target, and if it happens to be the police, which it often is, do you get feedback from members that you speak with that they feel closed in by this, that there's no friends out there?
Well, yes, and I almost don't blame them sometimes. I mean, when you go home and you've been called a pig a number of times during that day, you see, we live in an age where authority of any form, there's a lot of pushback, a lot of rebellion to it.
Yes.
Kids with parents and society, we don't like politicians, and it doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, you will become vitriolic in your comments to your politicians.
Yeah.
And so that angst, for whatever reason, is there, and when enough mud's thrown, it sort of sticks, and you go, well, is there really just us? And we're trying to do the right thing, we're trying to keep society together, law and order, all of those things. So sometimes the only people they can talk to and trust are each other.
Yes.
Which is important to do that.
Of course.
Everybody will close ranks. You can have a functional or dysfunctional family. You pick on the kids, and the parents will, support the kids, or the family or whatever. We have this tendency to do that as a human being, and there's right moments and there's wrong ways of doing it.
Yeah.
I think that's all it is when you close ranks sometimes. But it's across the border, and we all contribute to the negative side of it.
Yes.
And I've got to take responsibility for when I close ranks, when I'm not listening to something, some truth, something where I'm in a state of personal denial.
Yes, remaining constantly open is not an easy thing to do. You may or may not be able to answer this, but you mentioned before you turn to your invisible friend. How powerful is that with members that having not necessarily Jesus or Muhammad or anybody else, but just that internal special friend? Is that something that is a common way of managing? Well,
those that are at the coalface, again, looking at the services to community, whether it's fire, CFA, AMBO's police. I think many are, because they have nowhere else to turn. Okay, and if there are some inadequacies within oneself, and we're all not perfect, we're all a little flawed, and we all have an Achilles heel somewhere. Yeah. Sometimes that comes to light, or to life, and that's when we need another to invest that concern we have.
That internal fortitude.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, it's a great issue, and the problem is, of course, it's invisible oftentimes until it bursts out. But time bursts out as well, and it just has. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Gavin Baulch. He's a presenter with the Channel 31 program, Support Life. Thanks for that discourse about chaplaincy, Gavin. One of the things which is there, of course, underneath it is hidden pain. Now, this group that you've been working with, which is called...
Inside Out.
Exactly. That's working with young people with their internal pain. Could tell us a bit about that? That sounds fascinating.
Well, young people, like, I guess, us grumpy old men, keep things to ourselves. Returned servicemen won't talk about their horrors. Young people are absorbing information beyond their age, beyond their experience, and because they're visualising and seeing the world, this global world, unfolding and unwrapping before them. And the fact that this image of self, because it is about image, if you're on Facebook, you edit the image you want to be seen. Okay, so you can present an external, but the internal is something else, not often talked about, but sometimes it rears its head in suicide, just as an out.
Yes.
And we meet with teenagers and young adults all over the world. We've been to recently, Inside Out Global's been to Armenia, had wonderful time there with young adults making short films about life, reality, themselves. We do it in America, New Zealand, here in Victoria. Some schools have embraced what we do and trust us to go in and unpackage a strengths program and play to the strengths of the children and have them to move in a safe environment to expressing the things that concern them. We had a school recently over a 4-week period, 4 periods a day for that period of time, learning story structure and making short films about issues that were important to them, everything from bullying to mum and daddy are yelling at home and they're talking about divorce, and that's really hurting me, I can't concentrate at school. Very open and honest, even to the point that some of the kids were getting their parents to help them make films, which was interesting. We didn't know this was happening on a weekend, but they were so excited. And they sang a song every morning. I introduced a song, which was a bit risky. It's like what kids sing anymore at school, and they sang this song called "You're Worth More Than Gold."
All right.
Every morning they wanted to sing it, and then on the big film celebration afternoon at the school, they got up and did a dance and they sang. Like all Year 7 kids got together. It was all the classes, and they sang about their worth. Right. They were worth more than gold, and they believed it. And then the next year at that same school, when they went to Year 8, those kids were the main recipient or acceptance of things like school captain and team captain, and something had internalised during that time, and they were able to talk confidently about their pain.
With these little videos that they make, do they exhibit them anywhere? Where are they viewed?
Well, okay. What's duty of care? What are we as people involved in producing these short films? We give them a choice, and their parents, do they have their name on the credits? Is it their first name? Is it a nickname? Because we don't want to put them in a place where they're exposed to the public.
Right.
And someone with a bit of face recognition software can trace someone down. That's the age we live in.
Yeah.
So the schools decide what to do with the films.
Yeah.
The parents decide what to do with the film. We don't do anything. We would like to reference maybe one film that they've done as evidence, because it's an evidence-based program.
Yeah.
Whether it's in schools, if it's personal, if they want to put it on Vimeo, that's their choice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Or permission given to us to do it. So we try and protect, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And there are some little films out there. One made in New Zealand, one the best youth film at a film festival in Melbourne called Campfire.
Yeah.
So they came over from New Zealand to accept the award. The films are out there, and some of them are being used to encourage others to look at their pain too.
So rather than ask the common ground in the pain, what about the common ground in the strengths? You get the kids to look for their strengths. What's that look like?
Well, it can be things like just organisational. It's not a sort of a one of those Briggs things, aptitude sort of tests. It's quite. It just looks at these latent, natural little talents and gifts and emotions. Caring. There's a spiritual one where the kids are always looking out for the other person.
Yes.
And so we play to that. If it's organisational, well, we'll have them as director or producer. If they're very creative, then they might act or do the storyboard or write the script. We're playing to the strength, not to the weakness. We can find their weakness. The teachers will tell us what their weakness is. I'm not interested in that. No. I want them to go through a week of, there's something good about me. There's something good about me. And that lessens these other things, and it lets good things come out.
I'm creating. It's sort of, it's a little bit like people on a production line never being connected with the products of their hands. These kids are connected with that because they've got this video that they can watch. And they can put their hands
working
on.
as a small film crew of 6 or 7 kids, right, multiplied by 84 kids in this one case, was to finish a film in the short period of time they've got to work together.
Yes,
so there's other social interaction skills that they may never have known that they had before.
No, that's wonderful, Gavin. And we're coming to the end of time, and I want to be able to thank you for your time and the stories. And going back to last week, the State Aboriginal event, that was really moving. Thank you very much for your insight into that and into police chaplaincy as well.
All right, thank you, Norm. Pleasure.
You've been watching Harmony and Diversity. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om, Allah.